Hello everyone, and thank you for your interest in the Humber Industrial Cluster Plan. The Humber Cluster Plan is funded by Innovate UK, together with contributions from our private sector partners. It is led by the Hull and East Yorkshire Local Enterprise Partnership, or LEP, in conjunction with our colleagues at Catch. This presentation is designed to support the procurement process and documentation, but for the avoidance of doubt, it does not replace or supersede any elements of the procurement documentation itself. If there are any inconsistencies between this presentation and that documentation, then the invitation to tender documentation takes precedence. Here is a quick rundown of the topics I am going to address in this short covering presentation, which should only take around 10 minutes. Let me start with a bit of background and context. Firstly, it is important to note that the Humber cluster is the largest such industrial cluster in the UK. So large, in fact, that it is equivalent in emissions terms to the next two biggest clusters added together. Unsurprisingly then, the cluster forms a big part of the regional economy, covering both north and south banks of the Humber. As illustrated on the introductory slide, this work is funded by Innovate UK under the auspices of the Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge, a key component of the government's drive for clean growth and the 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution. The Humber cluster successfully participated in Phase 1 of the Innovate UK Challenge, addressing two dimensions of decarbonising this cluster. The first element was identifying and checking the scale and sectoral sources of emissions in the area. The second was about demonstrating the feasibility of adopting a systems modelling approach to developing the decarbonisation roadmap for regional industry. Now, at this point, we are into Phase 2 of the challenge and looking to take forward the development of this systems modelling approach, along with other key inputs, to deliver a decarbonisation strategy or roadmap for Humber industry. So now, a little more of what Phase 2 is about. As you heard earlier, the Humber Industrial Cluster Plan is being led by the HICP, together with membership organisation Catch, and 8 other private sector partners, as shown again at the bottom of this slide. I have outlined here in a little more detail what the expectations of the ultimate cluster plan output are. Unsurprisingly, this is about developing a strategic roadmap to decarbonise the region's biggest emitters, while doing so in a manner which maximises the potential for economic growth and the associated benefits across the region. The ambition is that the roadmap will prioritise tackling the region's largest emitters first, offering the ability to significantly decarbonise Humber industry by 2030 and to reach net zero by 2040. Insights into the necessary technologies will be required to underpin the roadmap, and how well this process is supported by regional supply chains for both skills and equipment. The outputs of this work will also inform the UK's wider agenda on industrial decarbonisation, and it's fair to say it is also attracting attention from industrial clusters overseas who are keen to see what they can learn from our work here in the Humber. Now let's take a look at the project team delivering this work. We have quite a small team behind the project, mainly comprising staff from the Hull and East Yorkshire LEP and Catch, with some additional contracted resource to support the more detailed technical aspects of delivery. We are also fortunate to be supported by an extensive group of active and enthusiastic advisors within our industrial partners, many of whom have experience across specific areas of the work we are looking to procure with these tenders. As you will have seen from the tender documentation, we are commissioning a suite of related pieces of work. But whilst these will be coordinated with the project team through a single designated point of contact, that's not designed to impede any form of collaborative working approach with the project team to successfully deliver these outputs. I'm going to describe the different lots in a moment, but I first wanted to explain the structure and how the lots fit together. Diagrammatically, you can see that we have a total of 7 lots feeding into the central lot 5, which is the cluster plan. We also have a baseline emissions study, which was first undertaken in 2020 and refreshed earlier this year, which will also inform the work undertaken on developing the cluster plan. More about these a little later. Those of you who have had a chance to look at the documentation will see there is a total of 10 documents. Document A only needs to be completed once, regardless of how many lots you choose to submit bids for. It comprises mainly commercial information in relation to your business. Document B describes all of the different lots, outlining what we are looking for and anticipated milestones that will apply during the course of the contract. Documents C through to J are the response documents, which you will need to complete for the relevant lot or lots you wish to submit a bid for. Now let's take a look at each of those lots. Lot 1 is the engine of the project. Phase 1 suggested building an energy systems modelling approach would be an optimum way to understand the technology pathways and related uncertainties to allow us to achieve deep decarbonisation by 2030 and net zero by 2040. Data will underpin the model and will be accessed from a variety of sources, working collaboratively with the project team where appropriate. You will see the connection here between this lot and lots 2 and 3, referencing the fact that insights from the modelling work may be needed to finalise the outputs from lots 2 and 3. And you can see this interconnection again on this slide for lots 2 and 3. Lots 2 and 3 are similar in that they are both applying markets, policies and regulatory lenses to understand what would be required to bring certain decarbonisation technologies to life in the Humber, including fuel switching, CCUS, greenhouse gas removals, and offsetting and transport of emissions. Lot 4 also applies a lens to the wider aspects of decarbonisation. This time, however, it is a social and cultural lens to help understand what steps and actions may need to be taken to facilitate the transformational change required to progress decarbonisation of Humber industry. For example, how do we bring together all the different stakeholders across the region, from industry leaders to employees, from public to policymakers, in order to make these significant step change? You will notice I've skipped Lot 5, and I will come back to that in a moment. Lot 6, however, seeks to identify the potential opportunities for inward investment in the region, which can be leveraged from the deployment of decarbonisation infrastructure. This strategy output will incorporate the evidence needed to support decision makers in inward investment and economic development teams in local authorities and local enterprise partnerships across the region. Lot 7 takes a look at the potential barriers to deployment in the supply chain sector, evaluating the current status and what might be required to underpin the decarbonisation transformation of Humber industry. Lot 8 takes a similar approach, but this time looking at the skills needed to build the decarbonisation transformation in our region. And finally, back to Lot 5, the cluster plan, at the very heart of the project. As already described, this is where all the other outputs are brought together in an overarching document. It will also use as a base the outputs from Phase 1 and the refreshed baseline emissions study, which was completed earlier this year. The cluster plan will be a strategy document that needs to land well with a range of audiences, from local and national government to industry leaders, academics, and an interested international audience. It will tell us what we need to deploy, how we need to go about deploying it, and how to overcome likely barriers to implementation, for example, by addressing such challenges as may be found in the supply chain, skills sector, or regulatory area. This procurement will follow a typical local authority process, which ensures rigour and fairness for all interested parties. Each submission will be read, scored, and subject to a moderation panel before a final selection is made. It is important to note that any queries should be submitted through the Your Tender platform and will be answered in that way too. It is also important to note that there are no interviews or presentations associated with this procurement exercise. It will rest purely upon the documentation that you choose to submit in response to the tenders. Here you can see a summary of the key dates, all of which are reflected in the invitation to tender documentation. For Lot 1, we would prefer the model to be tested and validated by the 31st of July against the 5 core scenarios stated in the ITT document. We anticipate that the scenarios and insights will then be captured in a written report and presentation by the 1st of September 2022. The insights and scenarios presented in the Lot 1 report will influence the final outputs of the Lots 2 and 3 work. Just a final reminder, please use the Your Tender systems to submit any questions. We won't be able to entertain any questions that are addressed to us directly by email, telephone, or in person. Thank you again for your interest, and we look forward to receiving your submissions. Thank you. Bye-bye.